Okay, hello everyone. My name is Zellnuu here. Zellnuu, wow, used uh, old name. Uh, Here running East Memories of Celceta, and with me I have, if you would like to introduce yourself, actually.
Hello, everybody. I'm Yoskimo, and I've been running this game for about a billion years.
uh, so anyway, I guess just get started because I know the marathon's running a little bit behind. Running any percent easy, so I'll just get started in three, two, one. So first thing you will notice, cutscenes are very quick. Thankfully, the PC port of this added a cutscene fast forward, which turned this run. What was it originally when you were running Vita? It's over 2 hours into a sub-hour run, almost entirely just with
Yeah,
that.
it saved a lot of time. It's mostly glitches that saved a lot of that time, but this fast forward cuts out like 80% of the cutscene time. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really really great. The other thing, I guess I should introduce the game itself. East Memories of Celceta is a action RPG, originally on PS Vita by Falcom. It is a long-running uh, action RPG series, probably, guess one of the first if you count the old Bump Pampa ones as action RPGs. uh, and just quickly equipping the sword, and just kind of going through early dungeon right now. Not too
The,
much.
the way
Oh,
the
go ahead.
way I could best describe this game, amusingly enough, is I used to describe this game as like what a Mana game would be like if it was moved to a 3D combat engine. And sure enough, when the Mana series did its Trials of Mana Seiken Densetsu 3 remake, it plays a lot like modern Ys games do. So, you have basic attacks, you have skills that you can bind to the four face buttons. We're only going to be using a handful of skills. The run's going to be done on easy. Difficulty actually doesn't matter a ton in this game because it's so ridiculously busted, but it is still the fastest category because things die the quickest. So,
Even though most of the combat has been routed and glitched out at this point.
pretty much. I ran this game, I think, for Midwest Speed Fest, like one of the online events in like 2018, and the run did not go that well. There was a lot of combat mishaps. Those aren't going to happen this run. If there's any
uh,
issues with the runs, they're in glitch execution. Speaking of glitches, let me just we don't really consider this a glitch, but it is a skip. You can get through that gate by loading up the cutscene viewer when your main character is positioned right next to the gate, and that's because the game's cutscene viewer is one of its more broken things. This is the first boss, Rocky, aka Aldo Boss. He's just gonna repeatedly hit the boss using attack skill, and he's gonna repeatedly parry his attack. Complete time guard that gives you a couple of seconds of mini crits and basically parries all damage so you don't take any damage. And then once that happens, uses his finisher, and the boss is basically dead because easy difficulty.
yeah, that fight. It's words are difficult. Can be a lot harder on harder difficulties as Ghost when I was running Nightmare.
We had to make a number of changes to the route because of Nightmare with that boss. So this is about the end of the portion of the game that's going to be played as intended. Because by saving all the miners here, we are given our main quest, which is to map out the region of Celceta, which Adol needs to go and explore the region of Celceta because he lost all his memories and he has nothing better to do. But the thing is, the map is the most broken thing in this game, which is amazing because there's a lot of broken things in this game. If you talk to an NPC on the same frame that you open the menu, which you can double bind to and guarantee that that happens, you can end up storing a text box on the screen, and by storing text boxes on the screen, you end up kind of suspending events, and by leaving and entering or going to specific points and opening and close the menu, you can actually trigger cutscenes to happen. So this cutscene that he's doing right now happens about a third of the way through the game in this first town. So we're just basically skipping like a solid third of the game, which was about 50 minutes of content of the 3-hour 80% fully glitchless speedrun back in the day. He's performing this twice, and this is because this will allow him to have 3 characters. The main goal of this is to get Karna, the orange-haired girl, into our party. Normally she joins at a specific point at a higher level, but by glitching and causing this cutscene to happen, we can get her early. And we want to get her early so that we can head straight to the second dungeon with her in tow.
Yes, because
because we need her to clear the second dungeon. Then we don't have to go through the whole like weird scenario where we get all of her backstory. There's not going to be a lot of explaining the story of this game because we've absolutely glitched the ever-loving tar out of it.
Yeah, there used to be time to explain some of the story. Now it's just gone.
Yeah, basically our main character lost his memories of exploring this region and all the people in it, so he's going to get them back. But we're not going to get very much of it. So one thing we haven't touched on, text storage in this game is really busted. Essentially, when you have a text box stored on screen, which is really easy to do by just opening the map twice, and then closing it, and then reopening it, you can just hold on to a text box from talking to an NPC and move around. And the nice thing about this game is you can actually hide text boxes by holding down the R1 button on a PS4 layout, for instance. So essentially, by storing a text box, Zellnuu is going to skip as many scripted events as possible because things like cutscenes, even though you can super fast forward through them, they're still pretty slow.
Okay, and here I'm setting up for bridge skip. I didn't take as much damage as I would have liked there, but intentionally taking damage and removing Karna's armor so she can die quicker in the water.
Yeah, we're doing a death abuse here. If a character dies in water and then is respawned at a higher point on the game's Z-axis, they will fall through the floor, which normally that would cause them Normally that would just cause them to hit a kill plane at the way bottom, but you can actually use water, which causes your character to slowly rise back up, to essentially get around a bunch of different things. Once again, using the cutscene viewer to reset his character position so that they're back in bounds. And then he's using text storage off of the drawbridge here, and this is a really nice little trick that you can do. Unfortunately, you can't press R1 to hide the text box, so the menu here is a little bit slow on account of having to use the mouse for menuing rather than using confirm and cancel.
And also, since my normal roll control would cancel this text box, I'm actually using left click to roll now, and the control stick to control, so it's a little awkward movement right now. So coming up, all this movement and, as explained, all this is to get into the second dungeon, which we are entirely going into just to get the mid-dungeon item. We don't need to clear the dungeon. The story already considers us kind of past that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's already set to a later state in the game story on account of doing the glitch that got Karna into the party in the first place. And this is actually part of why we're doing a text storage, because there's a mini boss trigger that is supposed to happen at the beginning of the dungeon, but because we're at a later story state, that won't happen. So there's no way to actually enter this dungeon without sort of reverting it to a earlier state, which thankfully whenever you're doing text storage, all rooms are sort of resorted to this like default kind of like debug state, which means that we can do stuff like overworld actions, and this is basically the reason we brought Karna here, is she can sever the suspended cable, which is her unique overworld action. We would not be able to do that if we did not have a text box storage.
So just a little bit more rolling. I didn't explain earlier, but we're switching to Durin, the blue-haired character, for most of the rolling, because characters have different speeds with different sort of movement options, and his is the fastest of all the characters, not just the characters we only have. And we won't be seeing two of the party members at all.
Yeah, there's 6 total playable characters. Each one has their own different little playstyle, set of moves, and all that.
Get out of here,
But we usually just go with the one that's best for combat. You can also, for the record, you can also do like a save and load here, although it's not always the fastest.
Right, I always forget
there's various different ways to respawn and despawn enemies in this game, but it's like you have to kind of make a choice sometimes.
Yeah, normally, a lot of the time if you get like far enough away, it'll just like super speed back to its default position, which...
Yeah, it's a strange thing. I've never been able to get it consistent.
But coming up is the bee, and we will only sort of be seeing the bee, maybe?
So there's definitely not the beast this run. This boss is kind of infamous within the community for being a massive pain. And the cause of most of my time lost last time I ran this game for the marathon. So thank goodness. That was a run. Anyways, so what we're gonna do is abuse the fact that AI controlled characters don't trigger things. So what Zellnuu's gonna do is he's gonna roll Durin onto the boss trigger, and then open up the map. He's gonna switch characters, open up the map, and Durin's gonna hit the trigger. He's gonna switch him to active character, but he's gonna be able to move around during the boss's opening cutscene, and then use the memories to cancel the boss fight entirely. So he got to the boss trigger and then just completely skipped it, and then by doing basically 7 neutral rolls into the trigger on the bottom right there, he can use the exploit again to get past the boss trigger and out of the room without ever triggering the boss or causing the fight to start. The reason that he opened the map menu and then the memory menu to reset everything is because eventually the boss fight would start, and if a boss fight starts on a room that doesn't have a boss fight in it, you just fall to the floor and die, or you just softlock. So yeah, he just completely skipped the second boss of the game.
And now we're going to completely skip the third dungeon of the game.
Yep. So this is Misty. Yeah, so this is Misty Peak. I don't know how it works this way. It's sort of like a Lost Woods type dungeon. You go down the wrong path, you reset back to the first screen. The main trick here is you need to always be going down. So we just have the or downhill. So we just know kind of the pathway through here.
I thought it was one screen further than it was at that point.
So Karna's not supposed to be in this cutscene, so she's gonna sleep outside, and then Zellnuu's gonna be getting text storage off of this NPC that spawns here after doing this. You can text storage off the tent, but it's slower than what we're doing here. So it's gonna get a text box and just hide it for a little bit. Now the pathway up to the 4th dungeon is just north of the 3rd town in the game. And we're not supposed to get there until we've done both the Ancient Burrow, which was the dungeon we were just in, and the I forget what the name of the 3rd dungeon is.
I don't remember either.
We don't go to it except in very miscellaneous meme categories.
Really janky movement.
Ancient Beast Slayer, that's what it was.
I don't think I've done that dungeon since my first playthrough.
Anyways, so the pathway here, we're supposed to get a bunch of information, and then Adol remembers something odd about this rock here. You can actually do a puzzle on this rock, but it's a text box storage, and we're forcing that event early, so we're able to get into the underground ruins here early, and that just lets us get straight to the 4th dungeon of the game.
And here, with once the really good music starts, we're supposed to have the item from the 3rd dungeon, which allows us to go underwater. But since we skipped the dungeon entirely, we don't have it. But the physics in this game allow you to... okay, so I didn't get the jump, but there's a backup where you can load a memory, which pushes you just a little bit under the water.
Yeah, that's this is one of your strats.
Yeah.
Which I am so glad you found, because trying to route around this would have been a nightmare otherwise. There's some out of bounds tricks you can do as well, but this just makes things so much easier.
Yep. Since this whole area is water, there is the similar trick we did with Bridge Skip, where you can have a character die in the water and revive to get out of bounds. But that's a lot slower, and that is oddly dependent on frame rate.
So the trick works with actually respawning and despawning the character. That just happens to be the only way you can do that when you have 3 characters. When you get more than that, it thankfully gets a lot simpler, but we don't have 3 characters. We're only going to get 4 of the 6. Higher difficulties tend to get 5 because the 6th character comes to the highest level and is useful for late game combat, but because we're playing on easy and combat's not really a problem, don't really need to worry about that.
And that was the 2 instances of the item we needed to go see the bee for. We will never need it again.
There's one of those that you can skip normally, but the other one you just can't. Like, there's in a theoretical low percent, you actually wouldn't need to get the dwarf bracelet because of a trick that lets you very slowly gain height. But that's slower overall than just getting the dwarf bracelet. It would be like 15 minutes or something ridiculous like that of just slowly gaining height. It's one of those cases where low percent would be minimum done rather than actually fastest. So we see this grave here, and it's actually our own grave, the main character of this game, Adol. People in the town up north thought that he died because he had something on him, which was basically the dark, powerful MacGuffin of the story, and they're like, there is no way he would be alive and just leave this lying around, so he probably died, and we need to make sure nobody can find it. Due to story reasons, they think he's dead, and so we end up digging up our own grave, but it turns out the mask is missing, so we need to go find it. So by doing that text block storage that he did, he's able to force an event that warps us up to the town, and then sets the game to a point at late in the evening. Going up this hill here, oh man, you got a bitter potion?
Yeah, I get the safety.
I haven't done that in a while. That's an oldie. Anyways, so in this cutscene, we're gonna see like this tower on a hill here, but it's guarded by lightning. In this cutscene following that, we're gonna get our 4th party member named Kalilika. She's really cool because she has the ability to she has the ability to get past lightning, but actually, in the current any percent category, she's useful for something very different.
So her main use for the combat for this fight, which will get us the ability to warp between any monument.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
This fight's not supposed to trigger until after we complete the next dungeon, but by using the particular exploit that he did on the previous boss and exiting the screen, He's basically stored a boss state and then carried it onto this screen, which he was able to use text storage to prevent that from happening until he gets Kalilka into the party, and then once he has her in the party, he can just he can deal with this fight much better, because all of our main characters are level 3, and this fight's like level 20 something.
Yeah, and as you can see, they're doing 0 damage. That got a little scary there. Needed that safety right away.
Yeah, I usually end up on that fight. I usually just put on the Dwarf Bracelet, deliberately take a death, and then try again. Because for whatever reason, when you trigger that fight normally, it's at night, and the boss is harder. But if you die, the boss actually gets easier somehow. Like if you die and hit retry, you get like they just do less damage and you take more damage.
Yeah, because it resets into the morning, but you get less experience doing that, which affects the next fight.
It's kind of a trade-off here. So we're going back to the B, and thankfully you only have to do this part once, and you don't actually have to exit the B fight itself the way that we used to, which involved repeatedly flash guarding one of its attacks to try and shoot out of the arena. By storing that, we now have a boss just available to trigger early, and so we just hold on to that for a while, and warp back up to this area, which although he did trigger the boss on the screen, during the animation of him falling out of bounds before he hit the kill plane, a different cutscene triggered, so we were able to bypass the death/soft lock. Now this area has really cool music, and it's why I like the 80% run, because we get to listen to it more than any casual player of this game ever would.
Get to listen to it for 2 screens.
Yes,
when a casual play would never go back to that area after clearing the dungeon. The music doesn't play there until after you clear the dungeon, which by defeating that fight earlier, we're set to a state after clearing that dungeon. But you would just straight warp a little bit further. So yeah, there have been 5 dungeons in this game. We did the first one because we had to, and it was the tutorial dungeon. We have done exactly half of the second dungeon, and then I'd argue even less, because we don't pick up the items needed to to actually open the door that are on the way.
We've done like 20% of the second dungeon, and like we beelined it through the 4th dungeon, and yeah, now we're headed towards the 6th.
And weird switches there.
Yeah, so I'm gonna let you focus on this one. I can just explain it.
Yeah, I might be counting out loud.
Yeah, so I always tell runners count out loud on this one. So what he's going to do, there's a little pool of water here, and that just happens to enable the respawn despawn glitch that I mentioned earlier that enabled bridge skip. So we do that to get out of bounds, and then you want to go up back and to the left, and the way you do this out of bounds is you switch your character between whoever is first and whoever is second, and then go to the memory cutscene viewer, and then just repeatedly reload that. And what this does is it moves your active character slightly back and to the left, as well as higher on the Z-axis. So effectively, by doing this 12 times, you get very high on the Z-axis, and then further and back into the left, and there's a loading zone back there behind this rock that we're not supposed to be able to get past until we get a much later ability. So doing a safety save, and then he's just gonna fall onto the loading zone, and we have just successfully skipped a boss fight and getting the 6th character.
And also a lot of story involving the MacGuffin.
Yep.
But quickly just went up to the right there to grab that monument, and now we will be going to another camp to perform another really weird trick involving a side quest that we have not initiated, that is in that town that we didn't go to.
Yeah, it's by using text storage you can just trigger the ending of that quest, which allows us to basically repeatedly finish the quest every time we roll over the trigger for it with text storage. And that's just a means to generate a lot of money on higher difficulties. I believe you only have to do it once on this difficulty, but we're just going to do that to get some money and items because it warps us straight to the shop. You can text storage off of the sapling here once again because we can't hide the text box. You have to do the slow menu using the mouse cursor. Yeah, he's going to set a warp point here, which we need to go to later.
And now, since we've been using really just the starting equipment for Durin and Adel, and they got a lot of experience for that last fight, we buy them new equipment.
Yeah, the equipment makes a huge difference in stats, and thankfully this game isn't like the early East games where one strength point means a difference between doing 1 damage and doing 8 damage a hit. So we're going to actually be able to do damage on this next boss. Which is a giant frog, so I'd appreciate any OS frog or any OS frog emotes in chat. It's kind of our blessings on this fight. So this puzzle here uses the mouse cursor. That's the fastest way to do it. You can do it with a controller, but mouse cursor's faster. Anyway, so this fight is kind of mandatory because a item that lets us break rocks is behind this boss, or is basically locked behind this boss. So what he's going to do there is use Kalilka's extra skill to basically line up a bunch of enemies, and it also kind of freezes the game in this weird, like, stasis. So he's going to wail on the boss without the boss really having any means to fight back, and wow, you got really lucky with this stasis.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, it lasts quite a long time sometimes, but it's variable and we don't know what triggers it and why.
It seems to be based off characters getting a skill during the extra, but I don't know, sometimes it just doesn't trigger it.
It's finicky, let's put it that way.
Very finicky.
Alright, I appreciate the frog emotes. Alright, so you didn't text storage off of this. You can text storage off.
I always forget that.
I always forget that too. You can text storage off of that chest there and save the little tutorial text box on there. It saves a couple seconds, but it's not a big deal missing it. Yeah, the music in these games is awesome. Several of the boss fights and dungeons have some really great music. And this is one of the weaker soundtracks in the series, so that just kind of tells you how high the bar really is set. So yeah, that accessory to break these rocks here is mandatory to complete the game, meaning that we still have like the frog left among boss fights, and then the final fight, which is kind of a joke. But there's like 3 more dungeons ahead. We're not going to do any of that. So I do need to give a special shout out to Jado, who found many of the tricks that we use here. If you followed the Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl run, Jado has had his hand in turning that any % category into a 15-minute like parlor trick run. So that just kind of gives you, to just give you an idea of who has worked on this game. He found means to like cut an already broken run of this game in half. So huge shoutouts to him for finding a number of the cutscene trigger text box abuse strats. What we're gonna do here is one of the biggest ones. This is how we're gonna trigger endgame. You load up the boss intro here, and then warp to this screen right next to the last town of the game.
That's very close.
And then roll up to here, this is actually the entrance to the final dungeon. by storing the text box on here and getting up to this screen right here and watching this couple of fade outs. And then opening the map a couple times, Shadow found that we were able to initiate this cutscene that opens the final dungeon early, while having full control of our character. Unfortunately, we can't turbo or can't super high speed this cutscene, so he just has to hit hold down the cancel button. But during this cutscene, we're able to move around, which is important because the door opens during this cutscene, and this is going to allow us to enter the final dungeon with a cutscene playing. And then, because we took a boss intro cutscene, we do have the game set to a state where a boss fight is scripted to happen. And on the first screen of this final dungeon here is actually a fight that the game considers a forced encounter or a boss fight. So by storing that flag, we cause this fight to trigger much earlier, which skips basically the entire final dungeon. This game is completely shattered at this point.
And getting through that door was like the holy grail for a while.
Yeah, getting through that door early was a big a big skip to find. So in the final dungeon, we beat the big bad and we get the Mask of the Sun back, but it's too powerful and his phantom is going to continually chase us until the end of time until we get rid of the mask. So we're just gonna go and chuck in a volcano and rip off Lord of the Rings. And this is basically the final scenario of this game.
Yep, coming right up to the final boss, who is scaled to our level because it's really more. It's not really the hard final boss. It's the more.
This fight's more like This fight's more of a cinematic fight than an actual difficult fight. Especially because, as you're gonna see here, we have a buddy in this fight that we're not supposed to. So this is Lisa. She kind of gets in our way a lot during a glitchless run of this game, but because she is scripted to follow us at some point, and the dungeon that she's in is like this terrible escort mission dungeon, which we thankfully skipped that portion of it. Instead, the escort is moved to here. I don't know why this is, but I'm grateful that it happens, because in this fight she cannot die, and she heals us, so we basically can't die in this fight. Yeah, so there's like 20 bosses in this game's boss rush. We do 3 of them. I suppose you can count the doofus fights, as I call them. The fights against
it's the hardest fight in the run, so it definitely counts as a boss in my mind.
It's yeah, pretty much. The fights against human characters, they're not really counted as bosses in the game's menu. Yeah. Yeah, so just making good use of flash guards and your basic combo in this fight. Adel does get much better skills in this fight, or for this fight for like a casual playthrough, but basic bread and butter combo with flash guard and rising slash is pretty much the best way to do this fight on easy. It's just the most optimal burst damage that we have access to. So yeah, he got hit by the boss's finisher and thankfully it didn't kill him, which means we got healed back to full because Lisa's useful for once. Thanks, Lisa. Anyways, time's coming up here very shortly.
Time.
GG. On my end, it says 33:08.
Yep, that's what we got here as well. GG's.
Yeah, that's a good time.
That is Memories of Celceta. Is a ridiculously broken mess of a video game that I love.
Yep. Sorry, I'm weird headspace for ending now because that's just very sudden after the boss. It's just like, oh yeah, it's done.
Yeah, this game's not exactly known for having a memorable ending. Which is one of many people's complaints about it, which I disagree. I actually kind of like the game's story ending, even if it is kind of abrupt. But yeah, good job on the run.
Yep. Thanks for commentating.
No problem. But I hope all y'all enjoyed and were able to at least vaguely follow what happened. Excuse me. It's like 5 in the morning here.
Yeah.
I'll say it was definitely a very interesting run to watch and very well done, very quickly done. Thank you so much for running it. Again, it was wonderful to watch.
Thanks for having
us.
For us. Yep.
Just give a couple of just very brief shout outs. Shout outs to Jato for breaking this game. Shout outs to Primorix for finding a lot of the strats. We don't use as many of in 80%, but his influence on the 80% route definitely can't be understated. Huge shout outs to Ravi, the Japanese runner who basically set everything in motion. He was the one who found the means to get around so many different like bosses and cutscenes here and turn the game from like a 2-hour like mostly glitchless 80% run to about an hour like very glitchy run first. Huge shout outs to Exeek, Lost, and Nazuna, who've all had their hands on the 80% run. We've had a very cosmopolitan community. So, several Japanese runners have had influence on the run. And thankfully, we've had a Western community develop for this game too, which for the longest time I was the only Western runner, so that made me very happy to see. But yeah, just shout outs to the East community. Shout outs to Zellnuu, who found some of the strats we actually used in this run and who performed the run.
Well, definitely, again, GG. Thank you so much for showcasing this for us. We're going to throw it back to intermission while we get set up for our next run.